Welcome back, everyone. Happy New Year. It's 2021. We can only hope that this will be a better year than last. It's been a while since I've made a video, so thank you so much for hanging on. I'm creating a new series at the beginning of the year just to kind of start with just messing around with a few things that I think would be fun. This is going to be a complete bolt series because there's already so many C# tutorials out there on this topic. So I've been playing a lot of Ghostrunner and Cyberpunk, and I thought we'd just make a kind of a first-person controller that allows us to do wall running, grappling, shooting, sliding, all that kind of stuff. A lot of little fun things. So we are going to, I'm just going to kind of show you where we're at. We have our menu, goes into a loading screen which will last for a brief amount of time because it doesn't take a lot to load it. This is what it looks like. We can aim, look around, can play the firing animation. We also have jumping. These are stand-in for our enemies that we are going to fill in. We've got wall running. There we go. We come up to this object. We can't go through over it. Through it. So we've got to go under it with our sliding. We have wall running to wall jumping, so we can jump from one. Oh, whoops. Okay, and that's about it. So we're going to do this for the time being. We're going to be adding enemies, which I haven't done as yet, but we'll do it as we go along together. So that's it. So let's get started. I'm just going to move this aside, and we're going to start with a brand new project. So I'm just going to move this to my other screen. There we go. So let's open up this, and the version of Unity I'll be using is I'm trying out 2020.2. I noticed that the beta of, so if we go to add and we go to the beta version of Unity 2021, it now has Bolt installed by default. So you don't know, once 2021 comes out, or probably in 2020 if we get lucky, we will no longer have to download and install Bolt. It will be automatically part of the base Unity project. But for the time being, I'm going to start with 2020. If you're doing a long-term project and you want stability, I would recommend staying on 2019. There's no reason to go to 2020. I'm just trying it out to see if there's any major bugs, if Bolt still works perfectly fine with it, that kind of thing. Okay, so we're going to go to project. I want to go new. Click on the drop down here to choose which version of Unity I want to use for this project. And we're going to start with a base standard 3D project. Let's call this I'm just going to call this Punkrunner tutorial series. There we go. Just make it 2021, so we just keep track of that. Just choose where you'd like to put the project. I'm going to click create. I'm doing this on camera so that you can see exactly what I'm doing, what I'm planning to put in, what I'm planning to use. So for this series, this first video is a simple introduction to, I'm going to show you how to go about implementing the new input system with Unity and Bolt specifically. I did find a nice tutorial on YouTube by this gentleman that and I liked exactly everything. I liked everything that he did. There was just one thing I wanted to tweak, so I rewrote some of the code to be a little more robust for any actions you add, any actions you remove. It's all going to be automated for you. So we're going to start. This video is just going to be a short one talking about how we're going to write the script. This is the only part of the tutorial that's going to have a little bit of C#. If you don't want to write it, I will have that script attached in the comments. So if you don't want to go through the hassle of typing all of that out yourself, I'm just going to switch my layout to Bolt. This is the kind of layout I like to have. Just find it easier to work with. It gives me more real estate for all my art related stuff here and all my panels on the right here. Okay, so now that we have this, we need to install the new input system. We go to Window, Package Manager. Now we just wait. The Package Manager is a little bit sluggish, so just be patient with it. I'm going to go to Unity Registry. We can either scroll down and look for input over there, or you can just search for it at the top here. Okay, so click install. Now the new input system, for those of you who are coming from an Unreal background into Unity, this will be make perfect sense to you. For those of you coming from Unity's old input system to this one, it's a little bit of like kind of changing the way you think, but it is an extremely robust system. It is the way you should be doing inputs in a game engine, because you don't have to go into your code or tweak anything in your code. You don't have to go and hard code any like on key down, on key input kind of stuff. You just call the action, and whenever you want to, if jump no longer should be on this button, you can change it to another button without having to access your code and rewrite parts of it. Okay, it will require me to restart Unity so that it can switch over to this new input system. There we go. We're now back to life. We're ready to go. I normally like to just make sure when I go to my projects, I start a project, I like to go to player and just change the color space from gamma to linear, just so that you get a more accurate representation of the way the scene should look. Gamma is the way we used to do it back in the day, and then we realized we weren't doing it the best possible way, so we had to switch over to linear. Okay, so let's start with the input system, and the way you can tell if it's been applied correctly, go to Edit, Project Settings, go to Player, scroll down to under the Other Settings. Where are we now? That's not it. Sorry about this. There are other settings, that's correct. Scroll down to look for the input system. There it is. They've moved things around in here. So the active input handling is the input system pack. You can do a combination. You can say both. If you want to use the old input system and the new input system. If you're wondering what I'm referring to, if we go to the input manager here, this is the old input manager where we had all of these presets set up by Unity. And the new one is you'll see it now, what it's gonna look like is, I'm going to create a new folder in my asset here. Let's call this settings. I'm just going to put all my related setting files in here. Makes no difference where you put it. And in here, I'm going to create a new, and you're going to go down to the bottom where it says input actions. Let's call this first person shooter inputs. Remember the name of this, because we're going to use this in our script. So whatever you name yours, you got to keep in mind that that name has to reflect in the C# script. So FPS inputs, we're going to go up to the top right here, and we're going to generate a C# class of this. So we're going to click that and say apply. And now we can just double click on this to open it. I'm just going to dock it to the top here. And this is what it looks like. So on the left, these are the different action maps you can set up. These are all the actions assigned to that action map, and then the properties of each of these actions. So on the far left here, I am going to create two, one for buttons, one for inputs like vectors, like vector 2s, like your analog stick, your mouse, your WASD keys. And then that way, when we call it in the script, we can just look in each of these action maps and do the appropriate stuff. So over here, I'm going to click plus and add one. This one's going to be called, let's call this player buttons. And the player buttons are going to have, let's just double click and rename this one. Let's call this one jump. So this is going to be my first jump. Now, on the far left, you'll see that it is of type add button. This one's also of button. So if we click here, we can choose what type of variable. So if we choose value, we can switch that over to a value of button. Same concept, but the value allows us to choose what type of value. So if it's a vector 2, vector 3, all of that stuff. There's some really nice settings here. Okay, so under the jump, if you open it up, there is no keys associated with this action. So let's click on the first one. Click on here, and I'm going to say that jump should be spacebar. So I'm going to click the listen button, hit spacebar. You'll see it'll pop up. And then I'm going to hit the little plus, add another binding, and this one's going to be for my gamepad. So I'm setting up these keys to be your standard kind of like jump will be where it's supposed to be. But I'm playing, like I said, I've been playing a lot of Ghost Runner, and the jump on Ghost Runner is the right bumper button. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to scroll down and look for the right shoulder button. And now we have keyboard, gamepad under the function, the action called jump. There we go. So that's working. And we're going to leave it for now as that. For now, we just got jump. We can come back and add as many as we want. I'm going to add a new action map here. I'm going to call this one player vectors. There we go. And this one's going to be, it can be value. And I'm going to say that this is a vector 2, because vector 2, you need forward and backwards, left and right, or you need on your, when you're looking around in the game with your mouse, you need away from you and towards you, right and left. So we're adding this as a vector 2. Okay, so this first one here is going to be, this first action here, I'm going to say is movement. Just simplified to move. Doesn't have to be the entire word. Okay, and in here we can choose what we want to have in here. So I'm going to remove this binding. I'm going to click come here and I'm going to add a vector 2 composite. What that means is it sets up, let's call this one keyboard. And this one's going to be up, down, left, right. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Up is forward, down is back, left is left, right is right. So up is going to be my W key, down. I'm going to click over here and hit the listen button. I'm going to push S to go back. Click here again, listen, press A to go left and right. I'm going to click here and listen and go D. So now I've set up all the inputs for the keyboard. All that's left to do is do all the inputs for the gamepad. So I'm going to again do this, add a binding this time, and I'm going to click here. I'm going to go back out of here, make sure I'm on gamepad. I'm going to pick my left stick. My left stick is going to control my movement. Okay, so we're going to leave this just for now, just to show that the new input system will work. We're not going to do any movement in this video, but we are doing all of the kind of inputs just to show you how you get the new input system. So if you don't want to be using the new input system, you can skip this video, but I'm just showing you how this works. So we've got player buttons, player vectors. You can have another one here for UI. You could have one for mobile. It's a nice way to kind of break down what key sets, if you will, what input sets you want to use based on what device, what all sorts of things. Okay, so that's it. This, for now, the input systems are done. There's the script. In here, we're going to just create another folder. Let's call this one scripts. And inside the scripts folder, I'm going to create a new C# script, and I'm just going to call this one new input interface. You can call it whatever you'd like. Again, makes no difference what you call this. I'm just trying to call it in a way that makes sense. I'm going to open this up in Visual Studio Code. Just want to make sure that this loads properly so we can see. Sometimes if it doesn't load properly, what you need to do, what I mean by that is if I'm here and I try to type in public load, okay, so mine is actually working. But if it doesn't work, I'll show you because it's probably going to break at some point. Okay, so this is what a C# script looks like. Most of you already know. We have a start and an update. We are going to be using the start and the update, so we need both of them. I'm just going to remove these comments. I don't need those. Okay, so we need to create a few variables that are going to hold the things that we need in these variables. Okay, so the first one is we need to create a reference to that input script we just created. Let me show you. We need to make a reference to this FPS inputs. It's actually a reference to the C# script. So we need to make a reference to that inside of our C# script. So at the top here, I'm going to type in FPS. Let's try that again. There you see it will pop up. That is the variable type. And I'm just going to call this player inputs. Okay, so that's the first variable we're going to create. The second variable is these are all going to be dictionaries. Now, easiest way to explain the dictionary is it is a type of list or an array that allows you to contain more than just a single piece of information. So we're going to be using this to store the information from the player inputs into a list, so we can go down the list and see which buttons we're pressing and which buttons we're not. So the first one I want to do, I want to make it public. We're going to make a dictionary. If I could spell dictionary. Sorry guys, today I cannot spell to save my life. So the first entry on the dictionary is string, because it's the name. Remember the name that we called movement? Move. We're looking for that name. And in this case, we want to store what type of variable. It is going to be a vector2. I want to give this a name, this variable. Let's call them, let's just call this vector inputs. So that's the name of the variable. And like a list, you just need to go and say new dictionary vector2. And there we go. So now what this dictionary is going to do is it's going to contain all the vector2 inputs that we're going to that we have in our actions. So in this case, we only have one for now. It's the move. And for the other one that we're going to create now is going to be for the button, is going to be the jump. As we progress through, we add as many as we need. It will add it to the list. And when we play the game, it'll know every button that we have, every vector that we have in our input system, and use them accordingly. Okay, so the next one's a little tricky because, you know, you've got an on button down, on button hold, and on button up. So when you have an input, so we need to create 3 dictionaries, one for each. When the button is down, when the button is up, and when the button is being held down. So we're going to go public dictionary. Again, this one's going to have the name of the button that's being pressed. And remember, this one is, a button is just whether or not it is a boolean, whether it's true or false. This one is going to be on button, let's call it on button hold. On button hold. And again, we're going to go new dictionary. And we're going to do this 2 more times. So I'm going to duplicate this line of code. And this one's going to be on button down. And the one below here has been on button up. Okay, so now that we have all the references to all the potential outcomes of what a button can do, whether you hold it, for example, if you want to just hold a machine gun fire down so that it does rapid fire or does burst mode or whatever it is that you want, you can. You'll have the option for when you're holding the button down, and when you're pressing the button, and when the button is up. Okay, so we're going to add an awake method, like that. And in the awake, we need to actually we need to basically create a reference to this and create a new variable like we do with the lists. So what I mean by that is I'm going to go and say player inputs is equal to, and we're going to go new it's not FPS inputs, like that. There we go. And over here we're just going to say creating a new variable reference to the new input in Unity project. Okay, so that's what we're doing there. We're making a reference to this FPS input system. We are saying, because at the top here, we're basically saying this variable is of this type. Over here, we're saying, okay, fine, we know what this type of variable is, but we need to actually have this variable contain the new FPS input system that we have in the project. That's all we're doing in the awake. Now, we'll do the rest at the end. Okay, so let's just move down here, and we're going to go into the start. So when we start the game, we need to go through all the inputs that are in here and add them to the appropriate lists. So the first one, we're doing a for each. And this one is going to be, let's call this vector2. This name makes no difference. Actually, let's call this input vector 2, just so we know what we're talking about. So for each, it goes through a collection or a list, an array, a dictionary, and for each item in that dictionary, it's going to do something. So this collection, we're going to start with the vector inputs. Okay, so it's going to go and look for, actually I lie, we're not going to go in there. I am completely lying. We're actually going to be using the FPS inputs. And in the FPS inputs, I'm lying again. Oh my gosh, it's been a while. We're going to be using the player inputs. So player inputs, and we're going to look for a specific action set. So player inputs dot, and I think we called it player vectors. So we are looking for that action, that group or set of movements that we did. So this one is going to be looking in that player vectors, and we're going to get all the actions. So we're going to type in get dot actions. So we're getting all the actions that are part of the player vector. What that means is, if we go back to Unity, we're going here, we're saying, okay, find the FPS inputs, find the player vectors, and find all the actions in there. So that's what we're doing in that the section. For every one that we find, we're going to go into our input vectors, and we're going to say dot add. We're going to add 2 round brackets, and in the round brackets, we need to know the name of the input that we're bringing in. So in this case, I think we called it input vector 2 dot name, and comma, we need to know the value of that. So in this case, we want, when we first initially start the game, we are not going to be potentially touching anything. So all I'm going to say is, because I know this is a vector 2, I'm going to go vector 2 dot, and I'm going to zero out that input. So we're going to add this item to the list. This one is move, for example, and the movement when we start the game is going to be 0, so the character isn't moving. Okay, so let's add a comment here. Find all the vector 2 actions in the new player, in the new input system. There we go. So that's what we're doing right here. We're finding all the vector 2 actions in the input system. Next, we're going to do all the buttons. So this section is find all the buttons in the new input system. Okay, and this one also needs a for each. And this for each is going to be done for all the buttons. So over here, we're going to just call this one input button. And the collection is going to be the exact same thing as before, but we're just going to be referencing this time the player buttons dot get. And we're going to say dot actions. So we're getting all the actions associated with the player buttons. And in here, we're going to be doing a few things, because remember, we have 3 lists, so we have to add them to all of the lists. So we're going to start with, starting at the top, we're going to do the hold, then the down, then the up. So let's do on button hold dot add. In here, we're going to be adding, remember, we called it input button. So we're going to go input button dot name, comma. And in the beginning of the game, we're not technically holding the button down, so I'm going to put a default value of false in here. I'm going to duplicate this 2 more times. We're going to change the beginning for the on button down. Let's do the last one for on button up. And they're all going to be false. We're not pressing the button down with the button. Oh, the button is technically up. On button up. We'll leave it for now as false. I think it should be fine. There's no reason it shouldn't work. Okay, so after we've now assigned all the buttons to all of these lists, we need to subscribe to all of these events. What that means is when I press that button, I'm going to need to make sure that the character is actually moving. So we'll need to subscribe to these events to see if they actually work. So we're going to give it a little bit of space, and we're going to look for the input button. And this is how we're going to set up whether they're being held down, whether they are not, that, you know, that kind of stuff. So when you go here, when you go input dot button dot, we have different options. We have performed means when you're performing the action of pressing the button down. Started means when you've started the action. And then we have another one down here called cancel. Cancel, there it is. Means when you release the button. So we're going to start by doing, when I have pressed the button down, we are going to subscribe to a new delegate. Delegates will require curly braces. And in here we are going to refer to, in this case, when we are performing the action, we're going to be doing the on, again, starting from the top, on button hold. We're going to put the square brackets, because remember the on button hold is a list. So the list, we need to find what button is being pressed. This input button dot name. Okay, so when we are pressing the button down for hold, it will now become true. We need to put like a semicolon to execute that line of code, and one on the outside to do the same thing. Okay, so we have now subscribed to that event. We've created a delegate that's going to keep track of when that happens. We're going to duplicate this 2 more times, and now we're going to say when we have sorry, my throat. So when we have released the button, we're going to tell the on button hold that it's no longer true. So we're going to, second one's going to be called canceled. We're going to leave on button hold, and this time it's going to be false. Then the last one is going to be used for when we press the button, we let the button go up. So this one's also going to be canceled, but this one is going to be on button up, and this one is going to be false. Okay, so now what we're doing here is, first set of things here, we are adding these items to each of the dictionaries. On button hold, on button down, on button up. And then each button will be assigned to each of these lists to keep track of whether it's true or not. And then over here, I'm probably going to find a nice cleaner way to do this, but for now this works really well. So, and then over here we're saying input actions.performed. So if we press the button, we're going to subscribe to a delegate. We're going to feed through the on button hold list. We're going to find the name of the button, and we're going to tell that button that it is true. When we let go of the button, we're going to tell the on button hold it's no longer being held down. And then at the end, when we release the canceled, we're also going to tell it that it is, once it's been released, that the button is no longer being pressed. So those are the 3 major ones. We have one more thing to do. No, we're good actually. That's all the starts. So now we need to go into the update, and then the script is pretty much done. So in the update, again, we're doing a for each, because remember we're cycling through all the different lists. So we have, in this case, we're going to have 3 lists, and we're going to be checking for things. So what that means is that for each, and over here, remember, we're going to go through the player inputs. And this is for the buttons, so we're going to go for player buttons dot, and remember we're getting all the actions again. Okay, so that's what we're going to be using, and we're going to be duplicating this over here. Actually, we'll duplicate it afterwards. Okay, so over here we're going to go on button down. So now we're listening for when the button has been pressed, because remember we've done the hold at the top here already. So we need to, we've done the cancelled of the on button up, but we haven't actually tackled the on button down. So over here we're going to go on button down, square brackets, and in here we're going to go, actually I haven't changed this. Let's just call this one Let's call it that. So you can give that variable name anything or just leave it as item. That is up to you. So dot name. So what is the name of the button we're pressing? And if that button is being pressed, we're going to say equals. And what is it equal to? Button press dot triggered. What triggered means is it is a function inside of the input manager, the new input manager, that says triggered means when you've just hit that button. When you've pressed that button, it triggers off an event and goes through and tells it that it has been fired. I wonder if we can't just use, instead of triggered, we could use performed, but let's just leave it for now like that. Okay, so that is when we, let's put a comment here. When the player presses any button on the keyboard or gamepad associated with the new system. What that means is any button that you press that you have assigned in your actions will when you press that button, will fire the for each, see if you've pressed that button and set it to be true. So I'm going to duplicate that over there. I'm going to change when the player releases any button on the, yeah, that's it. There we go. And this time we're going to replace this this one with the on button up. And over here, what that means is when we release the button, we're going to be setting that to be false. That's it. This is the small amount of code that controls all of the actions for button pressing, along with the delegates that we've got at the top here. So one more thing to do. This one is going to be when the player uses the analog sticks or keyboard inputs. Okay, so this one is going to be for any kind of input that we have set up under our, remember, our player up here. Where is it? Our player vectors here. So over here, we're going to change this one to, what should we call it? Let's call this vector inputs. Again, makes no difference what you call these variables. You can just leave it straight up as item if you want to. Player inputs dot, and this one's called player vectors. Remember dot get. What are we getting? We're getting all the actions inside of that player input. Once we do all of that, all we're going to do inside of here is we're going to tell that we're going to go through. We're going to go through all the player inputs. Sorry, the vector inputs. I apologize, that is incorrect. The vector inputs. We're going to put the square brackets. I'm going to find the vector input dot name. So vector inputs dot find the name of the currently active analog stick, whatever it is. And that being said, I'm going to say, okay, we are currently at this part in the list. What is the result of that input? So we're going to read the value. Remember, this is a vector2. And that's it. There we go. So what we're doing here is we're saying go through the list of all the analog sticks, all the game, or like all the kind of movement inputs, rotation of camera, all of that stuff in the player inputs. Go into the list that we created that controls all the vectors that we've got. Find the name, and if that input, if this name matches that name that's coming in, then we're going to update this one with the input value that's coming in. So if you're pressing forward, backwards, left, right. Okay, that's it. I think so. I think we're... No, I lie. One more thing. I forget. The new input system requires you to enable and disable. Like you need to subscribe to this new input system. So you need to tell it to turn it on and turn it off. Because once you start subscribing, like we're doing here, if you don't unsubscribe, you're going to create a lot of backlog and a lot of kind of collection of garbage, that kind of thing, which can slow your game down. So right at the end here, we're going to use two functions that are by default in a Unity. So it's one is called onEnable, and we're going to create another one just underneath it called onDisable. So onEnable and onDisable means when the object or the script is enabled or disabled. So when the script is turned on or turned off. So if the character is alive and currently active, we are going to go and say that our player inputs. So remember, this is the input script dot enable. So we're going to turn it on when the script is on, and down here we're going to say player inputs dot disable when the script is off. So we're enabling and disabling the subscription to this event when it's off or on, just to kind of clean up and not leave any unnecessary code lying around. Okay, so that's it for the script. This is the end of the scripting phase of this tutorial. We're going to end the video by just kind of doing a little bit of a show, just to show you that it works and how it works. So I'm going to just create a, let's say, a capsule. We'll start with this being our character. So I'm going to call this FPS. Let's call this FPP player. No. There we go, FPS player. So this is going to be what we're going to use to control the character, move him around. So on this here, we're going to add a new flow machine. Oh, guess what? Have not installed Bolt. Let's do that. Go window, package manager, because my Bolt is now inside of my package manager. If I go to the top left where it says packages, Unity registry, I'm just going to go to my assets, sign in. Okay, I thought I was signed in. Sorry about this, guys. I really thought I was signed in. I will be signed in right now. Okay. Once you sign in, if you have a Unity account, it just, like over here, it really just helps to keep track of all the stuff you've ever downloaded on the Unity asset store. So I'm going to go to Bolt. I'm going to go and import. Okay. Click import. Okay, once it's imported, we can just close the package manager, go to tools, install Bolt. Yes. Just say yes. I'm sure this part I don't have to slow down. There's one part I'm going to need to slow down a little bit just to kind of talk you through it, what needs to be done. But outside of that, the rest of it is your standard installation. So I hope everyone's had a good year so far. I hope you guys have an exceptional and great year for the year to come. We all need a good year this year. So Bolt, there we go. We click next. I'm going to choose programmer naming, and we're going to go all the way down. This is where it's a little different. Right at the bottom here, I'm going to click the plus, and over here I'm going to search for that new, if I could spell. Oh, it's not here, sorry. My apologies. Remove that and go next. It is in here. So here we're going to be adding, if you're wondering, we're going to be adding that over there as a type in Bolt. New input interface. Make sure it's the same name, and then click generate. Yeah, so this can take a little while, or depending if you've got like a decent solid state drive, you should be fine. It shouldn't take too long. It can just take a little bit depending on what the kind of performance quality of your PC is, I guess. Okay, close it. Now, the trick for this to work is, I'm just going to close all of these up. I'm going to add this script to the player. Remember, it's mono behavior. It requires to be assigned to an object in the scene. Now, I'm also going to add a flow machine. I'm going to create a new script here, which is going to go in my scripts folder, and let's call this first person shooter controller. Something like that, or FPP controller, up to you. There might not be any actual shooting in your game. Okay, so I'm going to click the edit graph button. No idea why it opened off screen here. Okay, so we're going to test it in here. So we're going to see how it works. So I'm going to maximize this, and I'm going to delete this and just leave the update. And I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to create a reference to the new input system. So let's just call this new input. And remember, we're going to search for new input system. There we go. And I'm just going to search for the object. So the object that's got this script is over here. I'm going to drag this script, this in. So now that we have a reference to where that script is, all we need to do is right-click, add unit, and type in new input system interface. There we go. And we want to get the exposed new input system interface. Plug that in so it knows where the script is. Now let's take a close look at this. There's my vector2 inputs. There's my on hold, down, and up. There we go. Now we'll be able to get that input system working inside of here. So we're just going to do a... Do we need a branch? No, we just need a debug log, actually. I'm just going to go... Just going to do a little debug log message. There we go. And we are going to need to do something specific. So what I mean by something specific, we need to find. So in this case, I'm just going to press the jump button. So I'm going to say when I've pressed the button down, I'm going to drag off, and I need to find the item. So type in get item, get dictionary item. There we go. And we're going to look for it based on the name of that action. So we're using a string, and I think I called mine jump. Okay, so if I press the jump button and it's down, you know, if this is correct, then we're gonna put a branch here actually. Because it's a bool, so we can just put some sort of message in here. So if I've pressed the jump button, then we're going to just print a message for us to hear what the message, just to see that it's working. So I'll put a string. Let's just say I am jumping. Okay, so let's see how this works. So over there is my input system. I'm going to be looking for jumping. If you're wondering where I got that name from, it is from here, jump. So let's see if it works. I really should move the console up there for now so we can see it. Let's put it over there. There we go. I am jumping. Notice how when I press the button, it fires through. So that's how we're going to handle buttons. And we're pretty much going to handle the other system the exact same way for movement. But I'm just going to quickly just show you a little system for movement. Okay, so let's just duplicate this quickly, put it down here, and this one's going to be called move, I think we called it. So this is going to be move. We're going to get that if, and this can't directly plug into that because it's not a bool. So I'm just going to leave it like this. We're going to say, put that in there so we can get the value of move. Now, as we go further along, we'll talk about how we're going to use this, but it's just a small little exercise of how to use this information. So if we look at our debug log, we should get I am jumping, and we should also get a value coming through, a vector2 showing me whether I'm pressing the buttons or not. There should say 0, 0. No. Explain yourself. Why are you null? Oh, sorry. That was stupid. Let's please not plug it there. Let's plug it into the vectors. Of course it was null because it didn't exist. So just go from the button to the vector so we can actually find the correct thing we're looking for. The voice inside my head just updated. So it says 0, 0. If I press forward, notice how it goes 1, backwards, left, right. We're getting diagonally. And same thing with the gamepad. Notice how the gamepad's working. And that's it. That is how we're going to implement the new input system, and technically we've already done that. So what's great about this system, the way we've set it up, is I no longer need to worry about, like, that script is done. We don't need to go back to that script. That was so every time we add something new, whether it be a button or a vector, we just go to the appropriate action map section, do whatever we need. Like in this case, let's just say I want to do, let's call it sliding. Slide. Yeah. I can say, okay, now I'm adding a new action map. This one here, we're going to say I want to slide when I press the left control button, or add a new binding when I press, let's say, the gamepad button south, which is the bottom button, and save. So now by doing this, I have now added a new action to my buttons. So if just to show that it's working, I can go up here, change this one to slide, change this to sliding, and you'll see that when I press the button, now that I've added the new action map, I can use any actions that I want. Okay, we're back. I spelled slide wrong, so that's why we got an error here. So it should be slide with an uppercase S. Let's do that again, and you'll see that it's going to work, and then we're good to go for the actual fun part of this. It's just, let's get the, I guess, get the admin aspect out of it. Okay, so we said left control. There we go, sliding, and if I press the bottom button on my gamepad, it works as well. So there we go. So the new input system is implemented. For those of you who want to use it, this is how you go about doing it. As I progress forward, and if I do find better ways to implement it, I will tell you guys. But I'm quite sure as the Visual Studio gets, as the visual scripting gets implemented more, it gets integrated better into Unity, we're probably not going to have to do this aspect anymore. We'll just do it the way we do any of the other inputs. Okay, so that's it. I hope this has been helpful. I will see you in the next video where we actually start talking about doing the actual character setup. So we're going to download some animations, strafe left, strafe right, all of that kind of stuff, which will then lay the groundwork for us to actually do any kind of movement. Okay, so thanks so much for watching this video, and I'll see you at the next one. Cheers, guys. Till then, be safe.